Hello everyone, my name is Justin Hilliard. Thank you for joining my presentation. Today I'm going to discuss Remington Outdoor Company. Our discussion will include three main parts. Firstly, I will discuss a bit of background about Remington, what it makes, where it was founded, etc. Secondly, I will discuss the greatest current threat to Remington. Remington does face certain risks and threats in its current market, just like any other company in any other industry. Lastly, I will present my recommendations for how Remington may look to refine its business to help ensure long-term sustainability and profitability moving forward into the future. Remington was founded in 1816 in a very small town called Ilion, New York. Ilion is located in central New York and it currently has a population of about 8,000 people. So clearly it is very dependent upon Remington's presence there. A few interesting facts. Ilion is the oldest continuous manufacturer in the United States. In 200 odd years of production, Remington has yet to cease its operations. Another interesting fact is that Remington is the oldest company in the United States which still makes its original product. In almost 200 years, Remington has still yet to deviate from its primary product offering of firearms. A third interesting fact is Remington is America's oldest gun maker. Remington makes guns in combination with ammo and several other product categories. It is held rather dearly in the hearts and minds of the gun-consuming community, given its storied history and how long it's been around. And down at the bottom left here, we see Aliphalet Remington. This charming gentleman is the man who originally founded Remington in 1816. Continuing with our background about Remington Outdoor Company, it is interesting to note that Remington is the only domestic U.S. producer of both firearms and ammunition. So Remington makes both the guns and it makes the bullets for the guns. This naturally helps to sort of hedge the business. Even in times when demand for firearms is down, people will still often need ammo for the firearms they have purchased. Remington is the largest United States producer of shotguns and rifles. It produces catalogs which include dozens of varieties of both shotguns and rifles. Another interesting fact, Remington has developed or adopted more cartridge types than any other ammunition producer in the entire world. I say adopted because some of the products in its ammo catalog were acquired via acquisitions. One good example of this would be our Barnes production ammo site, which is located in Utah. It's also important to note that Remington products are distributed in over 60 foreign countries around the globe. This is important because Remington is very old and well known in the United States, but it's often overlooked that it has such a widespread distribution footprint. This does help to give Remington a bit of an edge over some of the other large competitors in this mature industry. Up at the top here, I thought these were interesting, so I included them in this presentation. We see several marketing campaigns for Remington. These span a large period of time, but you can see a lot of them, especially the Christmas ad on the right, tries to strike a family type of nerve. It goes after the heart of the gun consumer. And in the middle here, you see that the Model 700 rifles. You can just see how many of those have been sold by Remington since it began producing them. A vast number. So to cover some recent events around Remington and around the firearm industry in general. In 2013, Remington saw a record sales year. This was the year I joined Remington, and they were riding a demand boom, to say the least. They did well over $1 billion in revenue in 2013. It must be noted that one of the more interesting factors about Remington's industry is it is partially driven by external politics. In the recent years, we have seen several high-profile incidents of gun violence. This has prompted politicians to feel pressure to pass legislation in an attempt to try to stem the violence. Um, so, though it is clearly a very volatile and can be a cyclical industry. In 2014, we have seen evidence of this. 2014 has been a turbulent year. Demand has declined somewhat, and in the midst of all the social pressure, political pressure, and in terms of the performance sliding a bit this year, Remington's owner, a large capital group called Cerberus, has made repeated attempts to sell the company. Um, the company has not yet been sold, but its status has somewhat been up in the air. In conjunction with these events, major restructuring within and around the organization is taking place, in large part due to a lot of this political and societal pressure. So Remington has been forced to adapt. Needless to say, public speculation within and outside the gun industry about the direction of the company and the industry on a whole has been also somewhat up in the air. Now I'd like to discuss what it is that comprises the greatest threat to Remington and the gun industry. So as I touched on briefly a moment ago, we have seen a rash of gun violence, especially in recent years. It's nothing new, but it does seem like the media attention and the frequency of occurrences has increased steadily over time. So with these continued events of mass gun violence, you have seen certain strategic challenges presented directly to Remington as well as the industry in which it operates, due mainly to changes in gun laws, which directly affect these businesses. There has been mounting public pressure on politicians and the gun community to act as a result of this continued violence, and again, a continued public image fallout has really affected sales and demand. And it's also pushed investment companies like Cerberus to really rethink and evaluate their ownership in this business. We've seen several gun makers already being sold, in some cases to industries overseas, and in some other cases, gun makers have gone out of business altogether. According to the FBI, mass shootings have tripled in recent years in the United States. Over the last decade plus, we've seen 160 mass shooting incidents between 2000 and 2013. That gives us an average of 11.4 incidents involving mass shootings occurring annually. And the trend year over year from 2000 to 2013, unfortunately, is a steady increase. Of these 160 incidents, over 1,000 people were casualties. This includes both those killed and the additional people who were wounded. 486 fatalities resulting from these 160 incidents and 557 additional wounded. So now I would like to discuss a few of the unfortunate, high-profile incidents of gun violence um, in the few recent years. Unfortunately, these incidents seem to become more common over time, and they only continue to strike more of a nerve with the public and with the ear of politicians, and it gets lost when you see so much violence that a lot of people are really responsible, people who believe in the Second Amendment and are responsible with guns and store and treat them safely and are responsible with them. In 2012, I'm sure some of you, if not all of you, remember the media coverage of the movie theater in Aurora, Colorado. Um, a man acted alone and stormed into a movie theater. It was crowded on an opening night and took the lives of 12 people. Additionally, he wounded 58 more. So, in addition to the families of the ones whose lives were lost, countless more lives are affected, in many cases for the rest of their life. In 2005, a lone gunman stormed onto the Virginia Tech campus, acting alone, and proceeded to carry out the deadliest mass shooting in the history of the United States. He unfortunately took the lives of 32 students on the Virginia Tech campus. And perhaps the saddest incident of all was the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting in 2012 in Newtown, Connecticut. A man acted alone. He was 20 years old and presumably acting without any discernible motive, carried a collection of weapons into Sandy Hook Elementary in Newtown and took the lives of 20 students who were aged 6 and 7. And additionally, he killed 6 teachers and ultimately took his life as well. Understandably, given the circumstances of this attack, public pressure on politicians was at an all-time high to do something affecting gun legislation and gun laws, to do whatever is possible and whatever is necessary to try and curb this violence. Looking a little more in depth now at some gun violence statistics. At the top of the screen, you have a chart which represents the annual average of gun homicides across several highly developed, high GDP countries around the world. And you see just how staggering the gulf is between the United States and other highly developed countries. Japan, for instance, and mind you, this is the entire country of Japan, averages less than 50 reported annual average gun homicides a year. Next, we have several highly developed Western European countries. Germany, Italy, and France all average less than 150 deaths per year related to gun homicides. Canada, the nation which obviously borders us just to the north, the entire country of Canada averages less than 200 gun homicides per year. And then you see the United States on the right. We currently average greater than 10,000 gun homicides per year. It's simply staggering. You can see on the chart it's greater than a 5,000% difference between U.S. annual gun homicides and Canada. Some more in-depth statistics at the bottom. It's estimated that 1 in 3 people in the United States, in fact, know someone who has been shot. It's also estimated that on average, 32 Americans are murdered with guns every single day, with an additional 140 being treated in an emergency room for a gun-related assault. It's also estimated that every day, on average, 51 people take their own lives with a firearm, and that an additional 45 are shot or killed in a gun accident. The U.S. firearm homicide rate, as we just touched on in the chart at the top, is about 20 times higher than the combined rates of 22 countries that are our peers in wealth and population. It's also estimated that a gun in the home is 22 times more likely to be used to kill or injure in a domestic homicide, suicide, or accidental shooting than it is to be used in self-defense. That last point is a key point, because self-defense is the argument that you will often hear from staunch Second Amendment supporters, that guns are necessary for self-defense and that guns should be more easy to obtain because they will be used in self-defense. This statistic seems to undermine that argument just a little bit. In response to the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting at the end of 2012, in January of 2013, the New York State Legislature passed the New York SAFE Act. SAFE Act stands for Secure Ammunition and Firearms Enforcement Act. To date, this is the most stringent gun legislation ever passed in the United States. It has several stipulations. I have highlighted some of the main ones here. We'll go through them now. It bans the possession of high-capacity magazines, like the ones used by the shooter in Newtown. It also calls for thorough dealer background checks, and all gun sales must be reported in a certain time frame. It also calls for the creation of an assault weapon registry. Assault weapons were used by the shooter in Newtown. It also requires that any mental health professional who receives what they deem to be a credible threat must report that threat. In many of these cases of mass shooting gun violence, it was unfortunately later determined that these individuals who acted to carry out these crimes were suffering from mental issues. Additionally, all gun thefts must be reported within a 24-hour time frame. Gun restrictions on households with members convicted of crimes are also ramped up per the SAFE Act. Additionally, all purchases must be through authorized dealers, and the dealer authorization process has been made much more rigorous in New York. Additionally, enhanced aggravated murder penalties for harm against first responders are enacted as part of the SAFE Act. Pistol and assault weapon permits must be renewed every 5 years. This is a critical point for Remington. Remington produces both pistols and assault weapons, or they did, I should say, in the Ilion, New York facility. This puts stringent requirements on anyone in the state who purchases those weapons. Additionally, firearms, per the SAFE Act, can be seized without a warrant if there is deemed to be a credible threat by the person holding those firearms. This particular action obviously threw proponents of the Second Amendment up in arms. As a result of these changes in gun legislation in New York, Remington has been directly impacted, both on a immediate business scale and profitability scale, as well as a long-term strategic scale. Needless to say, Remington has been forced to adapt, and that process continues. We will go through that now. At the top of this slide, you can see the Remington plant, the original site located in Ilion, New York. This is where the company was founded in 1816 by Eliphalet Remington, and where it still operates. The SAFE Act of 2013 had a direct impact on many of Remington's products that were produced here in this plant. Basically, several of the models of handguns and all of the assault rifles and Bushmaster firearms produced here were deemed to be immediately illegal. So clearly, this had an immediate impact on the business. Additionally, beyond these restrictions and guns being made illegal, many gun enthusiasts called for Remington to abandon New York altogether. They cited their belief that the new SAFE Act was basically an anti-Second Amendment, un-American law. The company, needless to say, suffered from numerous bouts of negative publicity. This publicity emanated throughout 2013 and focused largely around speculation that Ilion would cave to these cries from gun enthusiasts and actually close the Ilion plant. As I mentioned before, Ilion, New York is a community of about 8,000 people, and it's really hard to imagine it's continuing on without Remington's presence. They've relied on it for jobs, income, and as a huge pillar of the economy for about 200 years now. These fears and the publicity and the speculation and rumors have really not subsided that much. We've continued to see employees being laid off here, which is an unfortunate byproduct, but an inevitability of having to cancel product lines here and move them elsewhere. In addition to the product lines being moved out of Ilion, we have seen 7 additional plant closings in 2014. The sites are Elizabethtown, West Jordan, Kalispell, Kennesaw, Lawrenceville, St. Cloud, and Pineville. You see each of these sites, their location is mapped to the right on this border map of the states. These closings, unfortunately, were necessary, but they didn't help in terms of helping to subside the public speculation about the sustainability of Remington and the direction the company was going in. A lot of negative publicity came out of the decisions, which unfortunately were necessary to close these sites in an effort to make the business more efficient and more adaptable in a volatile market, in an industry that is having to change in the face of public and political pressure and scrutiny. As a result of these plant closures, here we see the primary product lines, which are being consolidated into the new Remington Huntsville facility. These product lines comprise mainly of handguns and the assault rifles, which were a casualty in New York of the SAFE Act. These lines, as I mentioned, are being consolidated into the Huntsville facility. Fortunately, that presents a ton of strategic and logistical challenges for Remington. As a 200-year-old company, obviously Remington has fairly well-established processes. So something like this coming along the line is the type of strategic challenge and event that can challenge the very livelihood of a company. It has been a all-hands-on-deck year for the company in terms of reacting to these changes and trying to do all the diligence and analysis necessary to make this happen as smoothly as possible without damaging the company any further. It has certainly presented a resource challenge for Remington. Here we see the new Remington facility in Huntsville, Alabama. Shortly after the SAFE Act was passed, the rumors started circulating that the company was looking for potential production sites to move its lines to in states with more friendly gun legislation. Huntsville happened to be the winner here. This required a capital investment on Remington's part of $110 million. This obviously presents a substantial portion of Remington's capital investment. It's important to note that when the company was developing its 3 to 5 year strat plans, this capital investment was not planned for. So this called for the sacrifice of other plans and goals that the company had. As I mentioned before, Alabama gun laws, naturally as a southern state, well south of Ilion, are a bit more friendly to a manufacturer along the lines of Remington. It was stated when the plant was open that 2,000 jobs would be created as a result. However, obviously, some are cannibalized at the cost of the other sites which were closed and the canceled product lines in New York. As mentioned before, the Bushmaster rifle and 1911 handgun lines were moved from Ilion, New York. Those jobs were cut and replaced in Huntsville. So the $110 million capital investment, it's important to note that does not factor in the HR cost of of either relocating people or recruiting new people who have the skills necessary to produce these highly unique, highly complex products. So it continues to take bites out of the budget for Remington. Several of the smaller sites mentioned on the last side that were shut down are also being consolidated into the new site. Those jobs are either being reloaded or replaced as well. So the dollars continue to pile up as Remington races to adapt to the changes in the market and in the industry. So now I'd like to present my suggestions for Remington in hopes of refining its business and hopefully increasing efficiency and productivity a little bit in hopes of addressing this risk and ensuring long-term sustainability. So let's do a quick overview of the risks and challenges that have been presented as a result of the recent events in Remington's industry. First and foremost, limited cash flexibility is a huge point of emphasis as this company has been forced to adapt and invested a substantial portion of its vital capital dollars in more gun-friendly states like Alabama. As I mentioned, the strategic plans and the budgeting did not account for over $100 million for a new production site in Huntsville. And then add on top of that the dollars required to train new personnel and get that plant up to speed. There is a learning curve in any new production facility. You don't just start up with the same productivity that you had at a 100-year-old site making a similar product. The next big risk for Remington right now is a lot of simultaneous strategic movement across the organization. There is obviously the risk of stretching the organization too thin. Resources are a fixed commodity. When you start moving multiple sites and consolidating multiple product lines and laying people off and hiring new people and investing in substantial capital projects, you're asking a lot of your workforce, and it's not like these are operations that this workforce carries out regularly. It's all new territory for this very old company. Obviously, we have the continued public and political pressure resulting from all this gun violence and the negative PR that it's generated, and the pressure on the industry and the pressure on Remington. And again, we have a 200-year-old company, very successful, well-known name, held in high regards. But 200 years is a lot of time to get very comfortable in your processes. And now you're having to adapt to simultaneous strategic movement. It is risky. So first, I think that it would benefit Remington to really take an in-depth look at their resource management processes as well as their supply chain. One method we can use to do this that we discussed this semester is the McKinsey model. I have each element of Remington's supply chain and resource management process laid out here, highlighted in these orange bullet points. First off, technology and development. I think there's a clear need to increase our investment in ERP infrastructure. There's a huge data limitation with Remington. People simply, across the organization, there are not enough people who have access to the company's data. This makes it really difficult to have visibility throughout your organization. And this visibility is critical to understanding where the company stands and how it's performing in a time of vital strategic transition. Next, we have product design. In 2014, Remington suffered through several very, very botched, poorly managed product launches. Most of these involve the 1911 handguns. There is a clear need for more attention to R&D and some vetting of our engineering personnel. these events in 2014 demonstrated a repeated lack of diligence in terms of carrying out a product launch for a new piece of technology. Next, manufacturing. Manufacturing, needless to say, is critical. We need to continue to focus on consolidating product lines. Production and efficiency and cost are not where they need to be for a market like this, where demand is falling and every capital dollar and every expense is substantial in terms of business sustainability. Continued consolidation of product lines and efficiencies is critical, and I think fortunately for Remington right now, I think Huntsville presents a great opportunity. Huntsville has about 1 million feet of production space, more than enough space for us to lay out a very solid lean operation and identify the critical elements to our processes and make sure that we duplicate those efficient processes throughout each of our product offerings. In terms of marketing, we really need to evaluate our campaigns, and this is a turbulent, volatile industry. We're under a watchful eye from the public and from politicians. Our campaigns really need to be focused on family-friendly aspects of shooting. Like I mentioned before, when you have constant media story of gun violence in schools, with the police, etc., you lose sight of the fact that there are a lot of responsible gun owners out there who use these things for positive reasons. There are all types of markets that we could tap into with our marketing, like sports shooting, clay, target, archery, and hunting, that go back to the beginning of this country, which is why people, held firearms in such a regard to begin with. In terms of distribution, I think there's a massive PR opportunity with our distribution. So rather than just looking at the bottom line and how we can maximize our sales, I suggest we evaluate security and screenings of potential distributors. In light of the SAFE Act, it's critical that we show the public that we are really vetting the people who are going to be pushing our products out into the public. They need to know that we're doing our homework and making sure that the people we're going to be letting push our stuff are doing their homework on their end as well. In terms of service, we need to learn the lessons that we were taught in 2014. We had a massive recall of our 700 rifles. We've got to invest in customer service in terms of our sensitivity and adaptability to service issues in the public. The customer comes first. If you fail the customer, then you failed, in my opinion. So we really need to make a worthwhile effort in the customer service department, whether that's their connectivity with other functions or their accessibility to performance data and financials in our ERP system. They need to have the pulse of the customer so they can communicate that to the rest of the organization. The next great area of potential that I see for Remington is with product customization. Remington makes a huge catalog of products. They have several iconic brands, such as the Versamax shotgun, the 700 rifle, and the 1911 handguns. But in terms of our past business and our current business, customized products for certain customers are very limited. I see potential to capitalize on many new markets, including military and government contracts that are typically, in the billions of dollars and guaranteed over a large number of years. In addition to that, you have other markets such as police forces, local, city, state police forces. You have private security contracts such as the Secret Service, just one example, but there are numerous private security associations across the country. And the commonality and the benefit to all of these new markets is they would be more adverse to potential changes in laws and gun laws and legislation. Private civilian gun ownership can be affected by laws, but I think it's a rather safe bet that the police forces of the country and the armed forces of the country are probably still going to need firearms for the foreseeable future. And coincidentally, it was announced just recently that the United States Army is looking for a new standard issue handgun. Just to provide a quick glimpse into what this could bring for Remington, the previous handgun contract that the Army held with Beretta lasted for 3 decades, and it rewarded that company with billions and billions of dollars. So as quoted by CNN Money, for gun manufacturers, this kind of contract is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. It would ensure, at the very least, business continuity and a substantial revenue stream. I think markets like these are an absolute must for gun manufacturers who hope to be long-term sustainable going into the future. My last recommendation for Remington is to take a long, hard look at its organizational structure. I think there is a big lack of organizational competency in terms of cross-functional training and visibility. A few highlights of this, the finance understanding across the manufacturing team absolutely needs to be increased. You can't drive improvements to the bottom line of your business if your manufacturing and operations teams don't understand simple financial analysis and they don't have visibility to the data. My next point is technology training is required across this entire organization. Every functional area has demonstrated, too great a dependency on corporate IT. It will save time and money while increasing organizational understanding, which really increasing the organizational understanding is the most important benefit of greater technological savvy across an organization. Each function needs to be independent in their use of the ERP system and the data that we have at our fingertips to understanding our company performance. We also have a huge production planning bottleneck in Remington. Production planning data and manufacturing plans need to be communicated, no questions asked, across the entire organization. Not having this data presented clearly and regularly prevents finance and every other team from accurately forecasting their performance as well as analyzing their performance. So I'd like to take a look at the current organizational structure for Remington. As you can see, it is a very lateral structure, very linear. There is literally very limited, if any, line of sight across the organization. I have found in my time there that the functions within the organization structure are very siloed and they are very isolated in many cases, which I think has got to change. A quick overview on the limitations of each one of these functions. Looking at finance, there is a very limited visibility to sales and production planning. This makes it next to impossible for us to accurately forecast and budget as the business evolves, which is absolutely critical in a turbulent environment like we have now. Accounting, in terms of accounting, we definitely need more communication between finance and operations and accounting. We have monthly inaccuracies which result from a lack of communication across these teams. On the ops side, the most critical sector in a manufacturing company, we've got to have more technical training on ERP systems and financial analysis. As I touched on a moment ago, we have to have the most accurate forecast and financial data possible coming out of our operations team at a time like this when we have so much strategic evolution going on. Product management, also, we need to really make a more robust push for financial knowledge in this function of the company. In terms of, in addition to more systems training and input from other functions. Again, in terms of marketing, more customer service insight. There needs to be a direct line of sight between customer service and marketing. I think we learned our lessons in 2014 with a recall that lasted the length of most of the year. Customer service insight needs to have a direct line to marketing. Our sales department, I think this function of the company sometimes acts as a standalone function too often. We need great insight into sales from every function, especially production and our financial performance. Sales cannot act as a standalone organization. You have to have integration between performance and sales. IT, as I touched on before, simply overwhelmed. There's too much cross-functional dependency on IT and corporate. IT needs to be integrated in some form or fashion into the primary portions of our manufacturing and operations network to help save time and increase efficiency. And as I touched on before, most importantly, every function in this organization needs to have access to our data in our ERP systems to understand how to do their jobs. Customer service and HR, I think that it's very dangerous for a large organization like Remington to have siloed areas of customer service and HR. Both these areas need to be more plugged into every function of the company. They should really serve as basically a temperature gauge, especially customer service. They are the line of sight directly to the customer. They have to be feeding the other functions information so those functions understand what's going on the front lines. In terms of HR, we're looking at a huge strategic evolution right now. People are coming and going. The organizational and management structure is shifting. HR has to communicate those changes promptly and efficiently. So lastly, I'd like to offer my proposal for an updated and revamped organizational structure for Remington. As you see, we have an open structure here with a line of sight between every single business function. I've also consolidated several of the functions. Starting on the left side, I have consolidated finance and accounting with an integrated IT function. Up at the top, I have consolidated ops and product management, also with an integrated IT function. And then I have consolidated sales and marketing, additionally with an integrated IT function. These three elements will make up our primary ops planning and analysis, as indicated by these green arrows. If you see the key down at the bottom left, these are the three functions which are absolutely critical to the sustainability and immediate success of this business. I think having an IT function integrated into each of these areas would enable them to run and manage their portion of the business as well as communicate their portion of the business to the other business functions much more adequately and successfully and accurately. Customer service and HR serve each and every function within the company, as you can see here. They act as an organizational support structure. As I mentioned before, customer service is the front line of communication with the customer. They have got to pass that data on and let each of the other functions know what is going on with our customers. HR, as I mentioned on the prior slide, also plugged into each other business function in this new model. They have got to communicate every change within the organization immediately to every function so every function can adapt their roles and do their jobs accordingly. This model will provide Remington with a clear cross-functional line of sight. And that concludes my presentation. I thank you for watching, and I hope that you learned something not only about Remington, but about a very interesting, very old, and currently very dynamic industry. Thank you.